Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that the entire security architecture of one of the world's most critical regions,
Right.
the place that basically keeps the global economy humming, has just been turned completely upside down overnight. I want to welcome you to today's custom-tailored deep dive, where we are going to explore exactly that kind of reality. You asked us to look into a really highly detailed military analysis video by Abdel Hamid Alaouni, and the framework laid out in the source points to a massive alleged strategic military escalation in the Gulf.
Yeah, it is an incredibly dense piece of geopolitical mapping. The mission today is to walk through this specific scenario exactly as Al-Uni presents it. We're looking at a hypothetical but highly detailed sequence of events involving the alleged destruction of major military infrastructure, a sudden vacuum of power,
And
and
the really crazy part,
right, the frantic scramble of old European powers rushing back in to fill the void left by a retreating superpower.
exactly. But before we go any further, I need to make something crystal clear to you, the listener. The source material you provided contains some intense military claims regarding the United States, Israel, Iran, and several Gulf nations.
Very intense.
Yeah, we are going to be discussing alleged military strikes, massive troop movements, and high-stakes brinkmanship. And I want to emphasize, we are not taking any political sides here. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, and we aren't confirming these events on the ground. Our job today is strictly to act as impartial guides, unpacking the strategic military calculus laid out in the analysis you shared with us. We're just here to convey the ideas contained in the original material.
Right, just laying out the board as he sees it. To give you a bird's-eye view of what this analyst is proposing, the video outlines what it calls Iran's Phase 2 strategy.
Phase 2.
Yes. This involves the deliberate targeting of U.S. bases in the Gulf, specifically in Bahrain and Qatar. According to the analysis, the fallout from these strikes forces a massive withdrawal of American troops. That creates a sudden security vacuum, and the fascinating twist, France and Britain allegedly step right into that vacuum to take over the defense of the region, which fundamentally rewrites the modern alliance structure.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first major theme the source dives into is the supposed fall of the American military anchor in the Gulf, starting with Bahrain. Al-Aouni makes a stark claim here. The video states that the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters and the U.S. Air Base in Bahrain have suffered massive destruction, effectively neutralizing them.
Completely taken offline.
Yeah, the phrase used in the analysis is closing the bracket of Bahrain, but just how critical is that specific bracket? I mean, why start there?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what the Fifth Fleet actually does. This isn't just a parking lot for ships. The Fifth Fleet patrols the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea. They essentially secure the shipping lanes that handle about 20% of the world's oil supply.
20%, that's huge.
It's the lifeblood of the global economy. The strategic equation the analyst is describing frames this as Iran's Phase 2 retaliation. The logic is a direct tit-for-tat escalation. The idea is, if the United States strikes Iranian military infrastructure deep within Tehran and across 50 other cities, Iran responds by completely dismantling the United States' regional infrastructure.
So it's an eye for an eye, basically.
Exactly. By allegedly taking out the naval command in Bahrain, the claim is that the first major American asset has been blinded and neutralized.
And the analysis maps out a progression that doesn't just stop at Bahrain. The crosshairs move directly to Qatar, specifically targeting the Al Udeid Air Base. This is presented as the immediate next step in the campaign.
But Qatar has a lot of defensive capabilities, right? Why aim for Al Udeid? Because Al Udeid is the central nervous system. It serves as the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, taking it out wouldn't just be a localized loss of a runway. It would effectively sever communication and isolate U.S. command across the entire Middle East. Furthermore, the analysis points out that Qatar is currently operating a THAAD missile defense system.
Let's pause there for a second. The source mentions THAAD a lot. For those who don't spend their weekends reading military tech blogs, what exactly is that?
Fair question. THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Think of it as a massive, highly advanced anti-ballistic missile shield.
Like a giant umbrella over the region.
Precisely. It's designed to shoot down incoming short, medium, and intermediate-range ballistic missiles in their final phase of flight. It is the premier defensive umbrella for the region. That makes Al Udeid a prime, high-value target in this escalating back and forth. The goal, according to the source, is the systematic destruction of these critical nodes of command and the defensive shields that protect them.
So, if the command centers are blinded and the shields are cracking, What happens to the regional allies who have relied on that American umbrella for decades? This brings us to the United Arab Emirates. Al-Aouni notes a major diplomatic pivot happening as a direct result of these strikes.
Right, a massive shift.
Yeah. The UAE Foreign Ministry allegedly issued a statement declaring a strict shift to a defensive posture. They are explicitly refusing to take an offensive approach or allow their territory to be used as a launching pad for attacks against Iran.
Which is a massive recalibration of alliances.
Uh-huh.
The UAE is essentially trying to thread a very difficult needle here, stepping back from the offensive line to avoid being caught in the crossfire of this Phase 2 retaliation.
Right, but I imagine you don't just fundamentally alter your foreign policy overnight without a catalyst. What's prompting the UAE to back away so suddenly?
The source gives a very specific tactical reason for this. The analysis claims that 2 of those Thiad missile defense systems located in the UAE were actually destroyed in this exchange.
Destroyed, so the shield actually fell.
Yes. So the shield has been pierced. And because the U.S. is allegedly taking these hits and struggling to maintain its defensive perimeter, a glaring security vacuum is opening up over the Gulf.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because suddenly France and Britain arrive on the scene.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
Right. With the U.S. supposedly stepping back and struggling to maintain the shield, these European powers are rushing in. The analyst explains that French President Emmanuel Macron has deployed Rafale fighter jets and alternative air defense systems to the UAE specifically to replace those destroyed American THAAD systems.
Yes, and Britain, along with Germany, is reportedly part of this operation as well. But from a military logistics standpoint, this is a fascinating substitution. You are replacing a ground-based passive missile shield, like THAAD, with Rafale fighter jets.
I was wondering about that, actually. How does a fighter jet replace a missile battery? They seem like completely different tools.
They are. And it changes the nature of the defense. A SAID system sits on the ground and waits for a threat to enter its airspace. It's passive until engaged. Rafale jets, on the other hand, provide active, mobile interception.
They go out to meet the threat.
Exactly. They can patrol the airspace, push the defensive perimeter further out, and intercept threats before they reach their terminal phase. It's a stopgap measure, sure, but it represents a highly visible commitment from Europe to secure the airspace.
The source makes a historical comparison here that completely caught me off guard. They compare this moment to a new Sykes-Picot. What does an old treaty have to do with Rafale jets in the UAE today?
It is a really loaded historical reference. Sykes-Picot was the secret 1916 agreement where Britain and France essentially carved up the Middle East after the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Drawing lines on a map.
Right. By invoking that, the analyst is pointing out the deep irony of the situation. We are watching former colonial powers rush back into the Middle East to play peacekeeper and defend the very nations the modern superpower has allegedly abandoned. It's like a geopolitical sequel to a movie from 1916 that nobody asked for.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. But the source adds a crucial caveat to this European intervention, right? They aren't there to join a war.
Exactly. France and Britain are stepping in to offer protection, but the analysis states they actively oppose and will not participate in any U.S. or Israeli offensive strikes against Iran.
So they're holding the shield, but they refuse to hold the sword.
Perfectly put. Their presence is strictly defensive. They want to secure the region, protect the global energy infrastructure, and prevent further escalation.
Yeah.
The text even claims that Donald Trump reportedly thanked Macron for this intervention.
Wow.
It paints a picture of a bizarre geopolitical handover where Europe steps in to hold the line, but purely on their own terms.
It's an incredible dynamic. Europe acting as the regional shield so the U.S. doesn't have to. But that begs the obvious question, why wouldn't the U.S. just reinforce its own positions? If the Fifth Fleet is hit, why not send more ships? Well, according to the source, they aren't reinforcing, they are leaving.
And the numbers the analyst shares regarding this withdrawal are staggering. We're talking about 9,000 U.S. troops actively withdrawing from the region. The source explicitly ties this retreat to the failure to protect the bases in Bahrain and Qatar.
Let's really think about what moving 9,000 troops looks like. You don't just, buy commercial airline tickets for them.
No, absolutely not.
You are dismantling communication grids, shipping out heavy armor, breaking down supply chains that have been entrenched for decades. It is a massive, highly visible retreat.
It is a logistical upheaval, and the source adds that there are another 1,500 personnel on waiting lists to get out. To put that into perspective, the analysis claims that after this massive withdrawal, only about 4,000 troops will remain across the entire Middle East.
4,000 from tens of thousands.
Yes. That is a historic, unprecedented reduction of the American military footprint. They are essentially leaving only a skeleton crew behind.
So if the military is packing up and breaking down its defensive umbrella, what happens to the civilians who rely on that presence? The source highlights a massive reaction on social media, specifically pointing to a viral post on X by the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs. The message to American citizens was stark. Leave immediately.
The list of countries included in that warning, what we might call the burn list,
Yeah.
emphasizes just how widespread the alleged crisis is.
Yeah, read that list because it's
The
terrifying.
source lists them out: Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, Bahrain, Egypt, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Syria, and Yemen.
That's the whole board.
The analyst claims this entire region is, quote, going to burn. It is an acknowledgement that the danger isn't isolated to one or two hotspots. The entire regional board is compromised.
But here's the stark reality for the civilians caught in the middle, which the source lays out. It is essentially a trap. You are an American citizen working in the Gulf. You log on to X, and the State Department is telling you to evacuate immediately. But how? The analysis points out that commercial flights out of places like the UAE are halted. The skies are literally closed because you have ballistic missiles and hypersonic weapons actively crossing the airspace.
Right. The infrastructure of civilian movement has collapsed. Trying to catch a commercial flight out of an active war zone is an impossibility.
And the source specifically notes that the U.S. military has not secured planes or airfields to evacuate civilians. There's no massive military airlift happening for the everyday citizen. Furthermore, Iran has given zero guarantees for safe passage for any civilian aircraft.
None at all.
The evacuation protocols have failed, and people are essentially being told to shelter in place because there is no safe corridor out. It is a logistical nightmare.
It represents a profound failure of security, according to the text. To contextualize why the airspace is so hostile, the source briefly maps out the surrounding chaos. You have Hezbollah engaging heavily in Lebanon. You have 27 separate drone strikes launched at U.S. bases in Iraq.
27.
Yeah. The analyst argues these countries have become entirely untenable for any American presence. And Jordan is allegedly the next prime target in this campaign to systematically expel American forces from the region. The pressure is coming from every side.
Which brings us to the ultimate threat holding this entire powder keg together. The analyst brings up a warning from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. It is a clear ultimatum.
A very clear one.
If the U.S. or Israel strikes Iran's petroleum or economic infrastructure, Iran will systematically destroy the strategic oil projects across the entire Gulf region. An eye for an eye, but on a scale that would completely cripple the global energy market.
This raises an important question, and it leads to the most intense strategic theory presented by the source. Why is the U.S. pulling out 9,000 troops so rapidly? Why the frantic warnings for civilians? Al-Aouni presents a scorched earth theory.
Scorched earth.
Yes. The proposition is that the current U.S. administration is evacuating its troops specifically to lower its own potential casualties.
Wait, if they pull out 9,000 troops, how are they supposed to project power or protect those remaining regional assets?
That's exactly the point of the theory. The strategy doesn't rely on ground troops to project power anymore. Once the board is clear of American personnel, the U.S. allegedly plans to unleash massive strategic bombers. The text specifically mentions the B-2 Spirit and B-1 bombers.
Let's define those for a second. The B-1 Lancer is a supersonic heavy bomber, and the B-2 Spirit is the iconic stealth bomber that looks like a flying wing.
Right.
When you start talking about moving these assets onto the board, you aren't talking about targeted drone strikes.
Exactly. You are talking about...
According to this analysis, the 9,000 withdrawing troops aren't just retreating, they are being removed so the gloves can come off entirely, regardless of what happens to the region afterward.
And that ties perfectly back to why the UAE is shifting to a defensive posture and why France and Britain are stepping in, but strictly refusing to participate in offensive strikes. They see this scorched earth potential.
They see it coming.
They know that if the U.S. launches a massive strike, the retaliation will hit the Gulf. Europe is stepping in to try and hold the shield because they suspect the U.S. might just be preparing to swing the sword and walk away from the resulting fire.
Because European domestic politics rely heavily on stable energy prices and avoiding a massive new wave of regional instability.
They are acting out of sheer self-preservation.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. To quickly recap the massive journey this analysis has taken us on, it starts with the rubble of U.S. bases in Bahrain and the blinding of the Fifth Fleet's command. It moves to the geopolitical chess match of French Rafale jets replacing American HIAD systems in the UAE, reviving century-old alliances.
It's wild.
We looked at the logistical nightmare of withdrawing 9,000 troops and the reality of civilians trapped amidst a closed airspace crisis, dodging the speed of modern hypersonic missile exchanges. And it culminates in the threat of a regional oil fire inferno, driven by a potential scorched earth strategy involving stealth bombers.
It is a comprehensive, deeply complex portrait of a region undergoing a violent and rapid transformation of its alliances and defenses.
And for you listening, this is why understanding the specific military analysis matters so much. Even if you are just trying to stay informed, the claims in this text aren't just about troop movements or which country owns which fighter jet.
No, not at all.
It is about a fundamental rewiring of global power dynamics. We are talking about old empires stepping in for retreating modern superpowers. We are talking about the fact that the decisions made in these command centers directly dictate whether global shipping lines remain open, whether European economies stay afloat, and whether the global economy keeps running or grinds to a halt. So, what does this all mean?
I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over, building on the framework we've unpacked today. Think about the global economy. It relies implicitly on the free flow of energy from the Gulf. For decades, the foundational guarantee of that flow was the unquestioned military supremacy of the United States in the region.
Right.
But if the security of the world's most vital energy corridor is no longer guaranteed by a single superpower and is instead being hastily pieced together by a patchwork of European air forces and fragile regional defensive pivots, how long before the global economic system realizes that the very foundation of its energy supply is standing on a geopolitical fault line? If the primary defender is allegedly packing up 9,000 troops to clear the blast radius, the entire premise of global market stability might just be an illusion waiting to shatter.
A completely new era of global vulnerability. Thank you so much for bringing such intense, high-stakes material to the table for us to dissect. It's deep dives like this that really force us to look at the board from an entirely different angle. That is all the time we have for today. Signing off, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.